Hello, everyone, again. Thank you so much for joining our 2024 Barriers to Prosperity Data webinar. I am May Whiting. I'm the Data and Research Director at Alabama Possible. And during today's webinar, we'll discuss some of the findings from our annual data project. We'll also highlight some tools that you can leverage that include our interactive dashboard and our discussion guides. And then lastly, we'll feature panelists from around the state who will share how they use the data sheet within their communities. So thank you again for joining. Before we begin, I would like to go over a few housekeeping notes. So this webinar will be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/alabamapossible. And then throughout the webinar this morning, you can submit questions using the Zoom chat feature. We also have received some of the questions that you submitted while you were completing the registration process for today's webinar on Zoom. So we aim to address all of those questions toward the end of today's webinar. And if you would like to stay up to date on what Alabama Possible is doing around the state, you can follow us at Alabama Possible on social media platforms. We have lots of exciting projects and events that are going on and that are coming up soon. So we do hope you'll stay informed. Again, that's at Alabama Possible. And then many of you are familiar with, I'd say, at least one aspect of our work. But if you're new here, we want to say welcome. And then I'm now going to invite Manisha Mishra, our Deputy Director at Alabama Possible, to share more about our organization and then some of our initiatives before we dive into our data. So Manisha, it's all yours.
Thank you, May. Good morning, everyone. As she mentioned, I'm Manisha Mishra. And about Alabama Possible, our mission, we are a statewide nonprofit, and our mission is to break down barriers to prosperity. And we do that three ways: through advocacy, education, and collaboration. So we have four pillars essentially around our scope of work. One is around post-secondary access, post-secondary success, advocacy, and civic engagement. Next, please. So all our initiatives are geared towards breaking down those barriers to prosperity, and we try to chip it away one step at a time, one day at a time, one initiative at a time. Our first one, as you'll see over there, is Alabama Goes to College. It is actually our post-secondary access initiative, where we ensure that every high school counselor and career coach, they're equipped with the tools and relationships so they can assist their students going into their post-secondary journeys, whether it's a 2-year college, 4-year college, workforce participation, or going into the military. We ensure that they are all equipped with those tools. Our next initiative you'll see is the Higher Education Alliance. Our Higher Education Alliance is a membership alliance of 22 to 24 2-year and 4-year colleges around the state. And what we do with them is, one, we provide, every year for the past, this was our 3rd year, we do a president's luncheon just to give a platform to the presidents of the colleges to come and network, because usually they're in and out of meetings and they don't get to discuss and collaborate on what are their strengths, what are the challenges. So we provide that platform to them. And then we also provide technical assistance, anything that the colleges need. We ensure that we provide them with, we do poverty simulation for them. We do technical assistance, like if they need assistance in course mapping, things of that kind, we assist them on that. Under our Higher Education Alliance, we have another initiative called Re-Engage Alabama. We worked with Alabama Commission on Higher Education and a national organization called Third Sector. And we did a year of research with 9 public universities in Alabama and collected data and saw that what we needed to do to re-engage adults with some college and no degree. So that resulted in a passing of a scholarship bill where students, if they adults, if they wanted to come back and re-engage and get their degree, with if they went into a 2-year college, they are awarded a $1,500 scholarship every semester till they complete. And if they want to go to a 4-year college, they are given a $3,000 scholarship till they complete every semester for high wage, high income majors. Then we have a break it down. As you can see, that's a barriers to prosperity initiative. What we do in that is we publish a barriers to prosperity data sheet, which is the essence of today's webinar, and May will go into it deeper into it. But we use that data sheet as our foundation for our civic engagement work. We go into counties, we partner with organizations over there and collect citizens and discuss with them what are the challenges, what is it that we can do to alleviate the challenges and elevate the success stories. And we also facilitate poverty simulations. We facilitate poverty simulations. Mainly, it is in-person simulation of families living through poverty for a month. And we do that to remove the stigma on poverty being something personal. But for people who participate in that simulation, they go through the entire month and see that it is not just a personal choice, but poverty is something because of the systemic barriers that we have over years that has been there. So we try little by little to shift that thought process, make that shift in the thought process of individuals to understanding poverty as a structural issue and not a personal issue. Then we have Alabama College Attainment Network. Alabama College Attainment Network, we have, what we have done is we have coalesced organization in the post-secondary access, success, workforce participation, workforce development areas, and got them together. So we are all rowing in the same direction in support of the Alabama state goal of having 500,000 individuals by 2025 with valuable post-secondary credentials. And then we realized that our Alabama College Attainment Network is actually the arm of policy, and we launched regional college attainment networks in the regional workforce regions, and ensured that they are the arm of practice because they are the boots on the ground. So the shared learning will come up to Alabama College Attainment Network, and we'll be advocating for policies. Then we have the Great Eight. So Alabama Possible is the convener for the first ever historically Black community colleges and predominantly Black community colleges. That's a mouthful, HBCCs and PVCCs in the state. We have 8 of them. And we work with Complete College America nationally on that project, where we have about 23 national HBCCs and PVCCs in the cohort. And what we do for us at Alabama Possible, we want again to elevate the success stories. The reason, the importance of community, these HBCCs, PVCCs. So to that effect, we have already released 5 case studies, which goes over the success stories over there, what are the challenges they are facing. And now we are about to release another one, another case study, which is around return on investment for these HBCCs, PVCCs. So overall, we use all this work that we do, all our initiatives that also direct our advocacy work. So Alabama Possible, we are proud to say that we are now nationally recognized as a great partner, as a partner who has data and a partner who can support national work. So this year we have I am sure most of you know about the debacle of FAFSA last year. In spite of that, we were 15th, ranked 15th in the nation in FAFSA completion. So we were selected by Federal Student Aid as one of the 6 organizations nationwide to host beta testing, phase 1 beta testing, where we had students come into a lab and complete the FAFSA. Complete the FAFSA's. FAFSA is free application for federal student aid. Sometimes we get stuck in all these acronyms and people are wondering like what it is. So FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. So students came in and they completed. So it gave us an opportunity to direct what FAFSA looks like when it is opened on December 1st, hopefully by December 1st. But we really had a good show out of students, and they were able to complete. And most of the students who weren't able to complete, actually, they were mostly for individual errors that had been committed during the FSA ID when they were doing their federal student aid IDs. So we also work very closely with National College Attainment Network, as well as Complete College America and advocate at the national level. And we also advocate at the state level, which led to actually first forming a state FAFSA completion dashboard, which is housed by Alabama Commission on Higher Education on their website. And then we also advocated for FAFSA completion to become a high school graduation requirement. We also, through our Alabama Goes to College initiative, students in once in fall and once in spring are able to apply for a week each semester. They're able to apply to colleges for free in and around Alabama. Next. I think it's back to you, May. Yes, it's back to me, you, May.
Yeah, as Manisha was highlighting, there's lots of great work going on, and really having an understanding of the data that we'll be covering today is so important for informing the work that we do and strategizing around the work that we do. So I hope that's evident by the end of today's webinar. But we're going to highlight the 2024 data sheet. Alabama is the nation's seventh poorest state. And I just want to start off by giving some background information about how the data sheet and all the accompanying resources are created every year. So we utilize both national and state data sets to report all kinds of barriers to prosperity. So many of the national data sets are going to come from the US Census Bureau. And then from that, we largely draw on the American Community Survey using their 5-year estimates. And then we also use state data sets. So that includes the Alabama Department of Human Resources, as well as the Alabama Commission on Higher Education. And as you'll see while we review the data sheet, we feature several measures such as rates of poverty, food security, educational attainment, employment, and health insurance coverage. And then within those measures, we always aim to highlight any disparities across different populations or different geographies. And the feedback that we receive pretty regularly is that our disaggregation of data is one of the most helpful parts of the data sheet. So just to summarize some of our key findings from this year, Alabama is the seventh poorest state in the country. According to the Census Bureau data, Alabama has more than 798,000 people living below the federal poverty line. That figure includes more than 237,000 of Alabama's children. And this is a slight improvement from last year. So just want to note that as we kind of begin to recover from the height or the peak of COVID. And then the poverty that we see in our state is always more concentrated in certain regions. So 11 counties in Alabama have a poverty rate higher than 25%, while only 2 counties in our entire state have a poverty rate under 10%. So let's compare Alabama to the rest of the country. So poverty in our state and around the country was decreasing in the years leading up to COVID, but then we definitely saw a pause in that progress during the height of COVID. So with this year's data, we're seeing some small improvements as poverty has slightly decreased from that big uptick in 2021. But you'll see here, Alabama has a much higher poverty rate than the national rate of 12.6%. So 16.2% of Alabamians are in poverty. Additionally, the child poverty rate in the US is 16.3%, while the child poverty rate in Alabama is 21.8%. And then lastly, we're highlighting median household income. So the national median household income is $74,755 per year. And that is more than $15,000 than Alabama's median household income of $59,703. So now let's take a look at some disparities across race and ethnicity. So when we look at the 3 largest racial and ethnic groups in our state, we see that the poverty rates across these 3 groups are quite different. So the poverty rate of Black or African American Alabamians is 25.3% on the left, compared to a poverty rate of 26.8% for Hispanic or Latino Alabamians in the middle. And then that's compared to a poverty rate of 11.1% for white Alabamians on the right. And another way to look at this is to understand that even though there are 2.5 times more white people in Alabama than Black people in Alabama, there are nearly the same number of white people in poverty as there are Black people in poverty. So, just one way to think about kind of the overrepresentation or the way that poverty disproportionately affects people of color. In this case, it was highlighting for Black and African American Alabamians. So then similarly, when we look at median household income across these races and ethnicities, for Black and African American households and Hispanic and Latino households, their median household incomes are far lower than those for white households. So we see $40,661 a year for Black or African American households, compared to $51,086 for Hispanic or Latino Alabamians, compared to $69,303 for white households in Alabama. So I just wanted to note median household income actually grew by 12.4% for Hispanic or Latino households. And this is happening kind of while nationally the rate of Latinos with bachelor's degrees is growing 2.8 times faster than the rate for non Latinos. So, just another reason why we prioritize college access and success work. So we highlight all of these differences among populations, not only just to know how to advocate and to support our communities, but also to highlight what might be contributing to the year over year changes and what we're really seeing happening among these populations. So let's now take a look at our actual resources. I'm going to pop a link in the chat so that you can access them. You can access all of our resources at alabamapossible.org/datasheet. So this is the landing page it takes you to. You can then click on our 2024 data sheet to open it up in a new tab. On the first page, we see our two maps. So this allows us to visualize and compare poverty rates of different geographic regions. So the darker shading indicates higher rates of poverty, while the lighter shading indicates lower rates of poverty. And then looking at the state map on the far left, we obviously see that certain counties are faring worse than others. So, like I mentioned, we see 11 counties in Alabama have a poverty rate higher than 25%. Seven of those counties even have poverty rates of 30% or higher, so close to 1/3 of the county's residents living below the poverty line. And then on the map of the United States, in the center, you can see Alabama is one of 7 states in the country with a poverty rate greater than or equal to 16.2%. So that darker purple shading. And then to give you an idea of how poverty is being measured, we have our federal poverty thresholds over here. So for a single individual, the federal poverty threshold is $14,880. And then for a family of four, the federal poverty threshold is $29,950. We say this every year, but this is a very inadequate way to capture poverty. You could have much more than these thresholds and still be struggling to get by. The one benefit of having the federal poverty threshold is that it does allow us to at least make some comparisons across states. So towards the bottom, we have some charts and graphs. Again, looking at the three largest racial and ethnic groups in our state, we see in the bar graphs that poverty rates and median household incomes across the three groups are very different. And then moving to the right, we can see how things have changed in Alabama and the rest of the country from 2018 to 2022. So, of course, Alabama has a higher poverty rate compared to the rest of the country. And then we have a lower median household income compared to the rest of the country. So, on the first page of our data sheet, we're really looking at that zoomed out view. And then when we go to the second page of our data sheet, we're going to see data for all 67 counties, as well as the state as a whole and the country. So I'm going to try to maneuver over here. So On the second page, we're broken up into big categories at the top, starting off with poverty rate disaggregated by demographic. So I always like to spend some time on this section because it is the most commonly misinterpreted. So the section starts out reiterating what we saw on page one, that 16.2% of all Alabamians are in poverty. And then we see the same breakdown by race and ethnicity. So, for instance, 26.8% of Hispanic or Latino Alabamians are in poverty. And so, what I want to clarify here and what commonly gets misunderstood is that this is not saying that 26.8% of Alabamians are Hispanic or Latino. Instead, it's saying the poverty rate of this group. So 26.8% of Hispanic or Latino Alabamians are in poverty. And then we see the poverty rate by education level. For example, the poverty rate of Alabama individuals 25 or older who are high school graduates is 15.7%. So, another way of saying that is 15.7% of Alabama's individuals 25 or older who are high school graduates are in poverty. And then you'll notice that as the level of education increases, the level of poverty decreases. So, just to reiterate, everything in this section is giving you a poverty rate of a specific demographic. In the next section, we have food security. So, this is measured by Feeding America, as well as it includes the rates of recipients of SNAP benefits or the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Then we see our education measures, like the percent of individuals who are 25 or older who are high school graduates or higher, or who have a bachelor's degree or higher. And then we also have college enrollment rates, including 2-year and 4-year college going rates. I want to note that these rates are from 2021. Almost all of our data is going to be from 2022, but the college enrollment data set is from 2021, since the newer data set did not include enrollment in out of state institution. So we just didn't want to have that exclusion be confusing or misleading if people were using year to year comparisons. So I wanted to highlight that. We then have our employment figures, including workforce participation rate of those 16 and older, and then median household income. And then lastly, we show the percentage of individuals who are 19 to 64 years old who are without health insurance. And this is really emphasizing the difference between those who are employed without health insurance and those who are unemployed without health insurance, showing the important role that work plays in our country for health insurance. So at the bottom of the second page, we have some key terms that are defined for you. And then we also have all of our sources listed out here. And I would always encourage you to notice the year of the data sources when you're using the data. As previously mentioned, we have a note on source 7 for our college enrollment data. Now I'm going to go back to our landing page and then pull up our interactive data dashboard. So this will be taking you to Tableau. And when you first access the dashboard, you're going to be on the poverty by state landing page. So here you can click any state on the map and see its overall poverty rate, its child poverty rate, and median household income in this table right here. If you go to the second tab, you'll be on poverty by county. So you can click any county on the map to see detailed data of all of the measures that are on our data sheet. So if the amount of data on the sheet is overwhelming to you, you can always use this second tab as a way to focus on a specific county of interest. And then our last tab is our county data table. This also allows you to compare different counties. So you'll see some of the table here is blank. I just want to make a note there that this is because that particular population might not be represented in the county. But the way you use this table is basically you can deselect all, and then you can select whatever counties of interest you would like to compare. So that way you're kind of looking at whatever is most important to you? We got a question during the registration process from someone saying they're particularly interested in all of the counties from Region 5. So this would be a great tool to use to kind of just highlight those counties of interest. And then you can also sort by measure by clicking any of the column headings, and you can do ascending order or descending order to sort those. So I would definitely recommend the dashboard if you're looking for data for a specific county, or if you're just looking to be able to easily filter the data. So I'm going to go back to our landing page and go to our additional resources. So we are going to go to our educator's guide first. This is primarily meant for students at the secondary and post-secondary level. So the goal of this guide is to provide some discussion prompts to really get students thinking about different elements of the data sheet and how poverty is impacting their neighbors or the people within their community. An important part of this is to really allow students to reflect on the impact of systems, institutions, and policies in our state. So, as Manisha was mentioning, a big goal of our poverty simulations is to understand how poverty is such a systemic problem. After our discussion questions, there are activities within the guide. So we have a community assessment worksheet that gets students to think about their home community. So they're prompted to fill out different questions relating to their home community and what they're seeing. And then they're asked to translate that into some kind of action outside of the classroom. So, how would you advocate for policy change based on what you're seeing in your home community? And then lastly, we have an exercise that prompts them to create an infographic or a visual representation of poverty. And that's just really getting them to, again, think more deeply about what they're seeing in the data and then thinking about how they can communicate that to others. So that's our educator's guide. And then I'm going to go on over to our community discussion guide. So this can be really used in any context. It doesn't have to be within the classroom. It's a little bit abbreviated, but it includes all of our discussion questions that we were just featuring in our other guide. So it's 2 pages and really prompting folks to think about the context surrounding poverty. Lastly, we have our toolkit, which you can see here. It's our barriers or breaking barriers to prosperity toolkit. So it is comprised of 3 different components that kind of build upon each other. So our first component is the discussion, where we talk within a specific area of the state about how poverty is impacting the community. That is then followed by a poverty simulation that Manisha had touched on earlier. So the goal of that is to really build empathy among the participants. And then the final component is our forum. That's really has a goal of moving folks from that awareness building and that empathy building to some kind of action that they can take either on the individual level or the community level. So all of these resources are accessible on our website. I know I just went through that very quickly, but I wanted to give you a taste of what you can leverage. Again, all of that can be found on the link that you see here. But I now want to transition over to our panel discussion. We have a lot of amazing folks from around the state, a great group of women here to share how they're leveraging data. So I'm going to briefly introduce each panelist before asking them questions. So I'm going to get started with Dr. Anna Margaret Goldman. So Dr. Anna Margaret Goldman graduated from Miami University of Ohio in organizational communication and received her master's degree and PhD in higher education administration at the University of Alabama. During her time in graduate school at UA, she worked with the Center for Service and Leadership to help run a school-based mentoring program in Tuscaloosa City and County schools. From 2016 to 2020, Anna Margaret led MonTech, Montana's assistive technology program, housed at the Rural Institute for Inclusive Communities to provide tools for people with disabilities across the state. She then served as the director of TRIO Upward Bound at the University of Montana, helping low income and first generation high school students attend college. She currently works for Auburn University Outreach as the director of the Center for Educational Outreach and Engagement, whose mission is to transform local underserved K through 12 communities through programs and partnerships in the classroom and beyond. So, Dr. Goldman, I would like to start off with a question for you. So, you use the data sheet to inform some of the programming and services that you provide through Auburn University's Center for Educational Outreach and Engagement. I was wondering if you could speak to the way that you utilize the barriers to prosperity data to inform certain programmatic choices. So, however you interpret that, it's all yours.
Absolutely. So first of all, the barriers to prosperity data is behind my computer. So I look at it every single day. And when somebody mentions a certain county or we're talking about a certain program, it's literally something that I look at all day, every day. But in terms of our programming, we're looking at this global picture, comprehensive picture of what is needed in the community. And specifically for us, we're looking at education. And so, just a couple of examples of programs in Auburn Outreach. In partnership with College of Ed, last year we received a Gear Up grant, which is an $18.4 million grant from the Department of Education, and we're serving 7,000 students across the state. And so when we were looking, where are we going to serve? How are we going to serve students? And writing that grant, um, we looked at poverty data. That was a really important measure. And when you look at the map of where our Gear Up Achieve students are, it is so in line with the chart that you showed, May, of where the greatest poverty is in the state. And the reason that is so in line is because we wanted to make sure that we could make really the greatest impact, where is the greatest need and how can we make a difference with the dollars served. And we all know in Alabama the need is, far more than what we can serve. And so when we were looking at schools, there are a lot of schools that might be on the failing school list, that do have high poverty rates, but we were not able to capture those schools because the need is so great in Alabama. One other example, and just because I think this is really interesting, and this is not in my work that I do every day, but for those of you who are working in health, my supervisor, Holly Cost, works with a rural health initiative, and they're putting telehealth stations around the state. And so this barriers to prosperity data was really important in what they were looking at and where they were going to place these telehealth stations as well. And some of the comprehensive data that they were looking at was the food insecurity data, which is so clear in the work that you all have, in addition to poverty and county health rankings as well. So such an important piece of what we do to make sure that we can make the biggest difference in the programs that we are doing.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And you're kind of uniquely positioned because you're leading a lot of work in the K through 12 area, but then you also have some touch points with undergraduate students as well on campus, obviously. So I'm curious, as the instructor of an honors college course that you had described as discussing the impact of poverty on learning, how in that course are you using data to lay the foundation for these undergraduate students as they're planning to volunteer in the communities and serve their communities?
Yeah, I mean, May, when you were talking, I think it's so important for undergraduate students who might not be from Alabama and might be from affluent communities that really haven't experienced poverty firsthand to realize that these systems are influencing communities, right? So this isn't someone's choice to be poor, that there are so many systems, the policies, the institutions that shape how these communities look. And so I think that's really important. And one of the things that we talk about that I feel like clicks with the undergraduate students, is this idea of, how does poverty affect learning? And the example that I think resonates is hunger, right? Food insecurity. And if you are hungry and consistently hungry and might not know where your meal comes from next, it's hard to learn. And I think that, you know, regardless of where you come from, that's something that students can understand. And in prepping for this webinar, I was really excited to learn more about the resources that you all have, because I think that's really going to help me shape those conversations with these students to ask them some of these discussion questions and use the educator's guide to really shape those conversations because they're hard conversations to have. And I think, again, having data points makes it more objective. And so these are really great resources that I've used and will continue to use. And now that I know more about them, that will make this class more dynamic.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you sharing this with your students. And I think what you've highlighted is something Manisha has emphasized, I've reiterated, but the discussion questions not only get students thinking, but then what we are also seeing during poverty simulations is people starting to understand the many different stressors. So, like you mentioned with food insecurity, just understanding how that big stressor in your life can affect your experience within the classroom and impact your learning in that way is just really eye opening for students who might not have that experience. So, we appreciate what you're doing both in the K through 12 space and in post secondary education.
Thank you.
So I'm now going to turn it over to Tara Mortensen, who is certified as a grant professional by the Grant Professional Association. She is also a GPA approved grant trainer. She has a Bachelor of Arts degree in mass communication from the University of Alabama at Birmingham, where she graduated with university honors and was recognized nationally as a PRSSA Gold Key recipient. After working in marketing, advertising, and public relations for 15 years, Tara established Tara Grants in 2010 to provide general consultation, grant writing services, and marketing scripts for regional nonprofit organizations. Her public relations background uniquely positioned her to be a compelling and persuasive writer, and she has since written hundreds of winning grant proposals that have helped her clients establish new programs and broaden existing services. Additionally, her in-person workshops have successfully built capacity of hundreds of nonprofit leaders to win grants more effectively and to manage the full grant cycle. So, Tara, as a grant writer, you utilize data to understand an issue and then also communicate an organization's approach to addressing that issue. So, how have you seen data shape the way that funders understand our state? And then also the important work being done by different organizations trying to address issues.
Um, so I work with at any given time 5 to 10 different nonprofit clients across the state and the region. And in a nutshell, although they're all very different, they're all trying to level the playing field. So they're offering educational programs, health programs, food programs, economic development, that kind of thing. And even though all of their missions don't directly address poverty, poverty and income considerations are still really important factors in all of their programs. So when I'm writing a grant for any of these clients, I have to make a strong case first that there is a problem or kind of an unfairness. And a really strong grant proposal needs to show that in both words and also numbers. And those numbers show objectivity and also fact. So, for instance, I can tell you all day long that Alabama is poor, but that statement is a lot more powerful and meaningful if I tell you that 1 out of every 5 children in Alabama lives below the poverty line. When I teach grant workshops, I always tell my students that the best statistics are the ones that make you kind of drop your jaw in disbelief and check the source. And the best grants are the ones that make the reader come to the dinner table talking about what they learned. My family gets really tired of this because every week I'm working on a grant and I'm like, frankly, it's usually very depressing. I'm like, guys, did you know that the median household income, and this is true, in Greene County is $35,000. So that's an income of, for 4 people, $35,000. And half the kids in Greene County live in poverty, and a third live in extreme poverty. So that's income less than 50% of the poverty threshold. So that means that for a family of 4, they are living on less than $15,000. That's the kind of statistic that I can pull from the census data, and of course from the poverty fact sheet, that just makes you kind of do a double take and like, okay, yeah, that's a big problem. That's a really big problem. And of course, if my mission is to get funding for people living in Greene County, then this is the very first thing that I need to say. Let's establish right here, objectively speaking, that there is a poverty problem in Greene County. And then from there, I can lead on to like what we're doing to fix that problem or how that poverty affects the programs that we're doing.
And you somewhat touched on it, but I know when I was speaking with you prior to the webinar, you were talking about working in many different facets from nutrition programs to environmental programs. So I was just curious, in your experience working with clients, how are you able to effectively convey that poverty is intersecting with all of these different social determinants of health?
Of course, one thing that we can see from the poverty data sheet is that poverty isn't equally distributed across the state, of course. People in rural areas, inner cities, and especially those in poor counties like the Black Belt are much more likely to be poor than, say, someone living in suburban Jefferson County or in Shelby County. Um, and then we also look at the data and we can see that those people in those poorest areas are more likely to have obesity. They are testing lower in school. They're less likely to be vaccinated. They have less access to preventative care and so on. So if you
Yeah.
want to know why, for instance, some people in some counties are more likely to have health problems, you can look at the health statistics and how that correlates with the poverty rate. And this helps us make the case that grant funds are needed specifically in this area to help with these problems. You can also, for instance, look at how poverty intersects with race and how those numbers intersect with college graduation rates. This might help us see, for instance, that Black or Hispanic students in some areas are just as likely to graduate college as their white peers. But those living in poverty are much less likely to graduate college or to even attend college. And that helps us get to the root of the problem and ask the right question. And asking that question is integral for developing a program and for getting funding for that program. So, for instance, if the numbers show that poor Black and Hispanic kids and their families aren't getting the same educational opportunities as white kids and their families in some cities and counties, how can we change that? So, does that kind of answer your question, May?
Absolutely, yes. Because you mentioned you work with 5 to 10 organizations at a time, working on grant projects with them. And when you were describing your experience over the many years of working with organizations in different areas, it just really emphasized to me that your background understanding of the challenges impacting Alabama is so relevant to so many different areas where an organization could be applying for funding. So there kind of is this underpinning within it that
Right.
is supporting the case you're making for these programs.
Absolutely. I work with the city of Jasper, their economic development engine, and we just got a really huge grant from the Urban Forestry Commission to plant trees. And on one hand, you might say, well, what does that have to do with poverty? But most of downtown Jasper is in what's considered a distressed area, and that's based on income. And so we're able to paint a really compelling picture with just a little bit of research that trees planted in a city help lower power bills. They help people, they make it more likely for people to get out and exercise, which of course makes people healthier. And we know that people living in poverty are much less likely to get exercise. They're more likely to have obesity. So that's a great example of how poverty really affects areas that you don't think about. I worked with Aldrich Gardens for a while. I still work with Aldrich Gardens, and they offer summer camps for kids. And so when we can say that we are teaching inner city kids about the environment, um, and also giving kids who are much less likely to have opportunities to get outside and see nature, and we are able to get them outside and seeing nature, then we're able to make a much more compelling case for funding. Even though, kind of on the face of it, those programs don't necessarily, or those grants don't necessarily look like there's a direct tie to poverty. But at least in Alabama, virtually everything comes back to poverty.
Well, we thank you for the work you're doing and always being an advocate as well in your work and
Well, the
utilizing
same
data
to
to
you,
do
May.
so.
You guys, what you're doing is so important, and I am looking at your data literally every day.
We love to hear it. Thank you so much. I'm now going to turn it over to our final panelist, Kara Anthony. So, Kara Anthony graduated with University Honors from the University of Alabama at Birmingham, earning both a Bachelor of Arts in English and a Bachelor of Science in Psychology. She also holds a degree in theology from Life Christian University. Driven by a passion for supporting the marginalized and underprivileged, Kara spent nearly a decade in international nonprofit development. Her work took her to Nepal amidst the dazzling snowy peaks of the Himalayas and across the US and Asia, where she spoke at seminars, events, and roundtables advocating for justice. Returning to her home state of Alabama, Kara now champions youth empowerment as the Director of Development for Junior Achievement of Alabama. In this role, she focuses on securing grants, cultivating and maintaining relationships, and driving the organization's growth to ensure young people have the tools and opportunities to succeed in a global economy. So, Kara, you work with a statewide organization that really empowers youth. As the development director, you often need to speak to certain regions of the state, whether that's to advocate for programs to be built or be expanded. How do you leverage disaggregated data at the county level to build relationships either with local partners or local funders?
Thank you, May. Thank you for having me. I want to go back to what Dr. Goldman and Tara both said. I also have the prosperity data sheet. I had it on my wall for the longest, and I was like, you know what? It's too far away. I have to have it on my desk because I use it every single day. So I did come from, like you said, international nonprofit in a developing country where we literally had to walk from village to village to village to be able to find some of this data. So I want to let you all know just how lucky you are that you have an organization like this to be able to provide it for you. But like May said, we are a statewide organization. So we work from the top of the state all the way down to the bottom of the state. And I often have funders and partners who have either a heart for a certain area, or they just want to fund a certain area. Or for instance, we're joining hands with a few other partners to reach the Black Belt region. And so they don't want statewide data, they want just the county data. So I work with the county data table often. I will pull just my counties that I need. I will even go so far as to pull, like, for instance, the 7, 8, 9 counties that I need, and then I'll average that data and say, hey, the averages within these counties are this. So it shows them exactly what they're looking for rather than seeing what you typically get is more of the broad level view. So it's just really good to answer that question at the county level to be able to pull out those smaller numbers and the numbers that mean more to the actual partners or donors who are wanting you to come to their areas or who are wanting to fund those particular areas. I know, Tara, I've kind of touched on exactly what you're saying, but I'm in the grant writing spectrum as well. And you know as well as I do, they want very specific data.
Thank you for that. And then Obviously, you're working with youth, which is similar to our Alabama Goes to College program. So, a lot of our work is preparing students for their next steps after high school. And your organization also works to support young people as they're kind of exploring and preparing for career pathways. So, I'm curious within the programming y'all provide, in what ways have you seen poverty and education and kind of workforce data aligning with the actual experiences of your students that you're working with?
Yeah, so junior achievement, our programs focus on things like financial literacy, work and career readiness, and entrepreneurship. We we view our students as they get literacy, they get, education courses, kindergarten through 12th grade, but they don't always receive financial literacy. And we know that is so important, especially when we're living in the seventh poorest state. We need to be able to grab these students, not just when they're a senior in high school, but when they're in kindergarten, and introduce these topics to them throughout. We are introducing a couple of new programs. Here in Alabama, it's actually a $21 million project. So imagine we're the seventh poorest state and we're trying to raise $21 million right now. So we're a lot of your data is coming out of our mouths and saying this is why we need to fund this. But just a broad view, some of our students will be coming through this program. They will be introduced to business and entrepreneurship, and they will not only be learning more about microeconomics, macroeconomics, what it takes to succeed in a global economy, what my next steps are, but they're also going to be introduced to Central Alabama work options, jobs, real jobs within Central Alabama. So we will introduce them to those. So that, of course, goes back with your question was about poverty, education, and workforce data. Those three things are key. They work together. And everything. So I go back and I pull your poverty data, I pull your education data, and we pull the workforce data. And then we're blessed enough to be able to work with an organization who also partners with like Ipsos, the Pew Research Center, TIAA, RMC Research, and we pull alumni data. So I can compare, um, like for instance, how many Alabamians have graduated from college or who have even been to college or who have graduated from high school, the poverty level of those, and then I can compare it to my alumni data of those who have been through junior achievement programmings. For instance, like one of our data points is that 84% of students who have been through junior achievement programming, they say that it influenced their decision to pursue higher education. So we can leverage your higher education data, partner it with ours, and say these are the changes we're seeing. Or another one that I love is that youth that have been through junior achievement programming, 73% of those say that they're actually using the degree that they studied, that they acquired in college, versus only 27% of average Americans can say that. So we want to be able to guide our students to, if this is a career that you think you may like, or if these are interests that you may have, this is the pathway that you should probably think about going, and guide them into that arena so that they won't be one of these statistics of, oh, I got a degree in X, but I'm actually doing Y. I'm not using my degree in the field that I'm in currently.
That is so powerful. Thank you for sharing. We love to see how things are playing out in the daily lives of folks who are either participating in our conversations, participating in our poverty simulations, but then in cases like yours, participating in the program, how that program has actually possibly changed their trajectory, and really supported them into the pathway of their choice. So, really appreciate the work that you're doing supporting students and utilizing data to both inform your programming, but also to advocate for more funding towards these programs that positively impact students. So, thank you so much. And thank you to all of our
Thank you.
panelists for joining us today. I wanted to move on to some questions. We have one for our panelists in the chat, so I thought I'd address it first. And Annette, you might, if you're able, come on to the microphone to elaborate if you'd like. But what does the panel think the impact will be if Alabama goes to a new student funding formula that other states have also moved to, related to education opportunities and services? So Annette, I don't know if you want to expound or if the panelists already have a response to this.
I'll jump in real quickly. Thank you for taking my question.
Sure.
It's, it's not voted on yet and it may not pass if it's voted on, but I'm just curious how the panelists with their expertise and data tracking and all the things that your organization does, if we went to the new funding formula, how would this open up opportunities for these areas of poverty and affect the data? So currently the formula is very set in you get X amount of dollars per student, and it's not related to your area of poverty, rural, travel, how many students you may have on IEPs or disabilities or anything like that. It's just a set formula. So the new funding would allow for some flexibility and take in different measures like that, such as rural communities with travel who have a higher need for buses to go pick up students. So that's just an overview. It's much more in depth than that, but that's the short overview.
And I have a quick answer. I think that currently, and this data point is from memory, so I hope I'm giving an accurate one. Students in poverty right now in Alabama system, it's like $50 additional. And I think that we all know that it takes more than $50 worth of resources to get the extra supports that students might need to get caught up and to be successful. So, I think that there's definitely room for improvement to change the funding formula to better meet students' needs that are in poverty.
Yeah, so quickly, I wanted to add to that, what Annette was mentioning about. So this school funding formula has been in place for the past 30 years. They have not revised it, not looked at it, and it is resource-based funding instead of individual student need funding. So that is why the research and all that is being done around that.
It sounds like moving from a more rigid understanding to one that is more context dependent, which we find to be a theme present in many of our community conversations that we have around data, is that the context is so important. So why is it that workforce participation is lower while transportation is a huge issue in that particular area? So context is so important. It sounds like this new funding formula accounts for more context. So,
and if any of you are interested in getting involved in the process, please send us an email and we'll invite you to the meetings that are held. And it is open meetings, anybody can attend. We need advocates. So yeah, please feel free to reach out.
the other question that we have in the chat was about the data set, whether it's downloadable for secondary analysis. And yes, I do believe through Tableau, there should be an option to download. If not, I'll follow up with you, Christian, about getting you our Excel spreadsheets for that. But I believe you should have an option to take all of the tables from Tableau to be able to manipulate in whatever way you like. I don't see any other questions in the chat, but I do see a note from Raven who would like to attend the meetings, Manisha. So Manisha's just dropped some contact information into the chat if you would like to follow up on that. As a reminder, you can download all of our resources at alabamapossible.org/datasheet. And then I also wanted to give y'all a note that we'll send a follow-up email that will include a link to all these resources, but it will also include a link to a survey just to get a better understanding of how you're using the data and how you experienced this webinar. So we appreciate any feedback you'll provide there. But I am now going to turn it over to our Executive Director, Chandra Scott, to close us out and then to remind you of some upcoming events. Thanks again to all of our panelists for joining us today. Chandra, all yours.
Thanks, May. Before I get started, I want to first just thank our three panelists for an amazing and engaging discussion you gave us today. So thank you for reminding us to use data to drive change across our state. Annette, I want to particularly thank you for raising the topic around transformation in our state around funding for education. And one question you asked about how do we foresee this changing the data sheet? What we're hoping is that generations later, the data looks different because we will see hopefully transformation through education. Because what we're hoping for through this, if it passes, that students get the resources they need. So we see higher high school graduation rates. We see higher post-secondary attainment rates. We see a decrease in child poverty and food insecurity because they have upward mobility because of the career choices that they have. So that is the hope that I personally would love to see, that if this is the route to make change in our state by revisiting and transforming data formulas for education, then it is our hope that it is reflected in the data sheet for generations to come. So also here, you see on our screen, we have our annual dinner coming up. We definitely would love to see all of your faces there. So please, if you would love, just be sure to scan there to RSVP for our Forge and Four dinner conversation. We'll have J.W. Carpenter for Prosper and Stacy Brown Brooks, I always get her name flipped, to be our two conversationalists during, she's with the Alabama Power Foundation. So I am looking forward to that conversation between the two of them. They individually are lively individuals, so I cannot wait to see what they're like paired together. So we should have lots of fun and entertainment that night. I also want to just thank all of you for giving your time this morning. So I don't take that lightly because I know all of you are very busy in one way or the other. All of you are change agents in our state. And so thank you for taking a moment for being with us. And then because of that, I just wanted to say that thanks to AT&T, we will send out a gift card to all of you to go take a moment to Starbucks on us, just as a small token of appreciation for you just taking the time, because we all know that you could be doing so many more things right now, but you spent this hour with us to learn more about how data shapes conversations and shapes change across our state. I also can't stop and not thank our board members. I saw a couple on here this morning, so to keep from getting in trouble, I'm not going to name them, but I don't want to miss anyone, but I did for sure see, I want to go ahead and name them, Ralph Foster, and I did see Chris McCauley. So I want to thank them both. And there are other board members that I missed. Thank you all for being really just so supportive of the work and just being leaders in this space around breaking down barriers to prosperity in our state. And of course, I cannot go without thanking the small but mighty team of Alabama Possible, who every year dives deep into this work and making sure this data gets out, specifically to May, who just lives and breathes this data sheet every day and making sure that it is accurate and timely for our state leaders and advocates to have this as a tool in their toolkit. And so I just wanted to thank her, and hopefully you all will join me in thanking her and the leadership that she has in our space in making sure that everyone is data driven and has this tool to do so. So again, I'm just so thankful to all of the support that we have from all of you. It's so many faces on here that are so familiar and some that are new. And so, but I just want to say thank you for looking and trusting Alabama Possible to being the source that you utilize for data for change in your community to impact the lives of your neighbors. And so what we have to remember, yes, this is the data point, but behind every data point is a person. And so we have to remember why we use the data. It is to change lives of Alabamians across our state. And so again, I want to just thank you all. And I really hope that I can hear more about these amazing stories about how you utilize our data sheet to make change in your communities. So please, as I think May shared earlier, all of our social platforms, please share those stories there. We would love to capture them and to elevate them, because all it does is just motivates others to be able to do the same. So I'm hoping that you will always use your voice to do that. And so again, thank you all for sharing your morning with us and learning more about the 2024 Barriers to Prosperity data sheet.